In today's video, I'll be exposing the 7 dangerous retirement lies that financial elites continue pushing, even though they know these myths are sabotaging millions of retirement plans. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Julia Lemke, certified financial planner, and through working with hundreds of retirees, I've discovered how mainstream retirement advice deliberately keeps people unprepared and financially dependent. And that's exactly why I'm making this video today. To reveal these manipulative lies, show you why the financial establishment benefits from your confusion, and provide the truth that protects your retirement security. So let's get into it. The first of these is the misconception that Social Security will be enough to fund most of your retirement. Financial elites and institutions indirectly benefit when the average American relies heavily on Social Security because it reduces pressure on them to offer more generous retirement benefits, financial education, mostly, or affordable investment access. Dependency on Social Security keeps the majority of retirees tied to limited income streams, which increases their reliance on high-fee financial products or predatory lending in retirement. The truth is that Social Security replaces only about 30 to 40% of the average retiree's pre-retirement income, far short of the 70 to 80% typically needed to maintain one's lifestyle. And despite the shortfall, the government continues to promote this misconception and the adequacy of Social Security benefits. Perhaps because acknowledging its insufficiency would trigger public demand for, deeper reforms or larger systemic support. But it's a convenient illusion nonetheless, right? By framing Social Security as enough, those in power avoid taking responsibility for the growing retirement gap. But the numbers don't lie, and relying solely on Social Security to fund 70 to 80% of your retirement expenses is just not a retirement plan. In fact, relying primarily on Social Security in retirement comes with serious financial consequences, many of which are not fully understood until it's too late. The average monthly Social Security check in 2024 was around $1,900, which adds up to just over $22,000 per year. That's barely enough to cover basic living expenses. It's not enough to cover basic living expenses, let alone fund travel, leisure, healthcare, etc. For most retirees, this is a sharp drop from their working income, often replacing only 30 to 40% of what they previously earned. This gap again creates lifestyle limitations that force many into financial survival mode, where every dollar is stretched and their choices become constrained by necessity rather than freedom. It's a dependency trap, one that keeps people from building their own financial resilience. What's worse is the false sense of security that Social Security creates. When people believe it will be enough, they often justify putting off or underfunding their retirement savings. I saw this very often early in my career, where good people were misled into thinking that they didn't need to save much because their Social Security benefit would be high enough to cover most of their expenses. Psychologically, this confidence leads to complacency. They assume the government will take care of them, and as a result, they miss their prime earning and investing years. Breaking free from this lie requires more than financial planning. It demands full personal responsibility. It means recognizing that your ideal retirement isn't going to be handed to you. It has to be built brick by brick with intentional strategy, discipline, and proactive choices. Next, let's examine the dangerous myth about retirement timing that costs people decades of wealth building. And this is one that I personally experienced with my peers. And this is the retirement is far away myth. About 10 years ago, my husband Eric and I decided to offer a millennial money class for our peers after several of them asked us what they should be doing with their finances. I think we charged $20 for 2 nights of learning about personal finance, cash flow, debt, retirement plans, insurance, and investing. And of the dozens that claimed they were interested, only 7 showed up. In fact, specific people that called me on my cell phone prior to creating class wanting advice didn't even end up showing. And this is because it's human nature to avoid what seems difficult and to want things now, not later. Waiting doesn't come easily, and building wealth takes exactly what many of us struggle with: patience and consistency. And in a fast-paced, convenience-driven world, that kind of discipline feels harder to hold on to with each new generation. Not only that, but financial institutions have a vested interest in letting you believe that retirement planning can wait. When people delay, they often end up relying on high-cost financial products, last-minute solutions, and reactive investment strategies, right? Services that generates bigger profits for banks and investment firms than they do for the client. In contrast, early planners tend to make lower cost, better informed decisions that reduce their reliance on complex financial products. That's why the whole idea of retirement is light years away just serves the bottom line of the financial industry. Consider this example. Sarah starts investing $300 a month at age 25, earning a 7% annual return. By the time she's 65, she'll have just over $760,000. Her friend Mark, on the other hand, waits until age 40 to start saving. And to reach that same $760,000 by age 65, he'd need to contribute $850 per month, so nearly 3 times as much as Sarah for fewer years. The difference isn't just about dollars saved, it's about what's lost. $200,000 plus in potential earnings, all because you started, 12 years later. And this myth is one that also leads to generational wealth gaps. Families who prioritize early planning don't just accumulate more, they pass on those, that knowledge and those habits and opportunity to their kids and grandkids. Meanwhile, those who fall for the "you've got time" myth stay stuck in financial catch-up mode, often for their entire careers. The psychological comfort of procrastination benefits the financial industry but costs individuals deeply. And breaking this line means challenging that mainstream narrative and recognizing that time, not money, is your most valuable asset in building lasting wealth. Now, before I move on, these lies could be costing you hundreds of thousands in retirement wealth. Please click the link in the description to watch my free video training where I'll show you how to build real retirement security. Okay, moving on to myth number 3. And this is really a half myth, in my opinion, and that is the myth that downsizing will solve all of your financial issues in retirement. I say half myth because I do believe that downsizing has an enormous effect on reducing expenses, right? Of course it does. So I don't want to make it seem as if there's no merit here, because there certainly is. But it's not something that's going to solve all of your financial problems, right? It's not a reliable retirement plan. Downsizing fails to address major drivers of retirement costs like rising healthcare expenses, long-term care, and inflation. Many people expect that with fewer square feet, they'll automatically spend less, but that's rarely the full picture. Property taxes, HOA fees, moving costs, renovations, plus the emotional toll of relocating can eat into any financial gain. So if you do plan to downsize, that's great, but just make sure that you're accounting for all of your future expenses in your retirement plan. The next myth is a big one, and this is the inheritance myth. I want to start by saying that for many, inheritances make the difference between a great retirement and a non-existent one, right? We have a number of clients that are retired because of their inheritance. However, there are also a number of clients that believed they would inherit a fortune, only to realize that there wasn't much left. In our practice, if a client believes they'll receive an inheritance down the road, but there's no terminal illness or reliable timeline, then we'll exclude those assets from the plan. Just like the other 3 myths, relying on a possible inheritance leads to undersaving and underplanning. Inheritance-based retirement planning is built on shaky ground, and more often than not, it collapses. Studies actually show that nearly half of all expected inheritances never arrive as planned. Life is unpredictable. Long-term care, medical emergencies, market downturns, or even the cost of their own extended retirement can quickly consume what was once expected to be passed down. Take Linda, a 58-year-old teacher who expected to inherit her parents' $400,000 home and use the proceeds to delay drawing down her own retirement accounts. But when her dad ended up needing nursing home care, nearly all of that equity vanished. At the same time, Linda downsized her own home thinking it would unlock $150,000 in investable cash. But after realtor fees, moving costs, and renovations on the smaller property, she walked away with less than $50,000, right? Far short of what she expected. And with no inheritance and limited downsizing benefit, she was forced to drastically cut her spending and delay retirement by several years. The psychological toll was just as heavy as the financial one. Linda described it as a slow grief process, watching the retirement lifestyle she imagined slip away. And the lesson is clear. The only retirement plan you can count on is the one you build yourself. Understanding these financial myths is crucial, but the most dangerous lies involve timing and professional guidance that keep people from planning adequately. Let's talk about timing and the myth of catching up later. This myth is convenient because it gives people permission again to delay action, which is what I referred to earlier in our millennial money class. It preys on the belief that future income or better timing will fix the problem. Take James, a 42-year-old engineer who believed he could catch up in his 50s once the kids were out of the house and his mortgage was paid. For years, he only contributed the minimum to his 401k, assuming he'd ramp things up later. But when he hit 52, life didn't go as planned. His job changed, his aging parents needed support, and a market downturn wiped out a chunk of his portfolio. Suddenly, he didn't have the income or the time to make up for all of those years of undersaving. Even maxing out his catch-up contributions wasn't enough to close the gap. Late-stage planning left him with fewer options and forced him to consider working well into his 70s just to maintain his expenses. And let's not forget about how financial institutions benefit from this myth, because when people start late, they often turn to high-fee annuities, complex insurance products, or overly aggressive investments in a desperate attempt to make up lost ground. Worse, doing it yourself often leads to costly mistakes. I work with a lot of former DIYers, most of which are very savvy, but even they make mistakes that they wish they could go back in time to fix. Without professional guidance, people may underfund retirement accounts, take on too much risk, or miscalculate what their lifestyle will actually cost. Starting late also means missing out on decades of compound interest, which can't be recreated no matter how much you invest later on. You may also miss strategic opportunities like Roth contributions, Roth conversions, tax loss harvesting, or optimizing Social Security that require long-term planning to execute effectively. In the end, these lies create a future where retirement isn't flexible or fulfilling. It's constrained, stressful, and full of regret. The truth is that the earlier and more intentionally you start with the right help, the greater your freedom later on. And lastly, let's talk about the "I'll work forever" myth. The idea that you can just keep working if retirement falls short is just a comforting lie. While it's often presented as a fallback strategy, the reality is far less reliable. Studies show that more than 50% of retirees leave the workforce earlier than planned, most often due to health problems, layoffs, or family responsibilities. People assume that they'll work well into their 70s to make up for financial gaps, but life rarely unfolds that predictably. Depending on extended work years is not a retirement plan, it's a lack of one. It ignores the real risks of aging in the workforce, from declining physical ability to age discrimination. And it places enormous pressure on your future self to bail you out. When people delay retirement planning with the belief that they'll just earn their way through retirement, they're gambling with their time, health, and stability. The truth is, working longer should be optional, right? Not a necessity. The only way to make that possible is through proactive, early, and realistic retirement planning. Speaking of which, let's look at the steps to creating real retirement security. Building the security means creating a plan that stands on its own, without relying on Social Security, optimistic inheritances, or any other comforts or false comforts of catching up later. To do this, your plan should aim to replace at least 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income without Social Security. This begins with calculating your real retirement needs, which are based on your desired lifestyle, location, healthcare costs, and inflation projections, right? Not just on a generic online calculator or government benefit assumption. Once you know what your ideal retirement truly costs, you can reverse engineer a strategy to get there. Reliable retirement income comes from layered, diversified investments, not just one index fund or CDs or just focusing on any one financial instrument. There should be a good blend of the best of growth and income. Dividend-paying stocks and funds, low-cost index and sector funds, bond ladders, real estate income, and systematic withdrawal strategies can all play a role in creating income streams that are not dependent on market timing. The key is balance. You want both income and growth potential to project against longevity and inflation risk. Aside from your actual investments, you'll want to have a mix of tax-deferred accounts like traditional 401ks and IRAs, tax-free growth vehicles like Roth IRAs and HSAs, and taxable brokerage accounts for flexibility. Start early and make it automatic. The earlier you begin investing, even small amounts, $25 a week, $10 a week, the more you benefit from compounding. Automate monthly contributions and annual increases to retirement accounts so that wealth is built steadily, regardless of market fluctuations. Overcoming procrastination often starts with one small win, right? Opening the account, setting up the transfer, taking the tax deduction. Momentum builds from there. Over decades, tax strategy matters as much as investment returns. Use tax diversification to spread your risk, right? Don't rely solely on those pre-tax accounts that may be heavily taxed later. Incorporate some Roth contributions, some health savings accounts, and brokerage accounts to make sure that you have an array of accounts to choose from that are all taxed differently, some much better than others, once you actually retire. Finally, build your retirement strategy to be adaptive. The economic landscape will change, and so will your life. A secure plan is not set in stone. It evolves. Revisit it regularly, stress test it against worst-case scenarios, and make sure that you're testing for long-term care, early deaths, etc. And by the way, there is no perfect retirement to my fellow Type A's out there, right? A strong retirement plan is simply building a flexible, disciplined system that protects your lifestyle no matter what the future holds. Okay, now that you understand these lies that the financial elites use to keep people dependent and unprepared for retirement, you can start to build a strategy based on truth rather than manipulation. If you're ready to break free and build real retirement security, click the link in the description below to watch my free training video where I'll walk you through the complete system for protecting your financial future. I'll see you next time.